The room was already warm when Bruce Lee stepped inside. Not the heavy warmth of summer, but the stale heat that comes from too many bodies standing still, waiting. The kind of air that feels used. The kind that carries old breath, sweat that has dried and returned. The faint odor of wood soaked with years of impact. It was late afternoon. The sun outside was beginning to tilt, its light cutting through high windows at an angle that made dust visible. Each particle floated slowly, undisturbed, as if even the air itself was hesitant to move. No banners hung on the walls. No official markings. Nothing that suggested permission. This was not a place meant for history. It was a training hall used by men who valued outcomes over records. A borrowed space. Temporary. Forgettable by design. Bruce noticed immediately who was not there. No photographers. No students. No spectators pretending not to watch. Only a handful of men stood near the edges of the room, arms folded, faces neutral, pretending they were simply present by coincidence. They were not. They had been invited quietly, not formally, individually, each one told not to speak of it, each one curious enough to come. At the center of the room stood the other man. He had arrived earlier. He always did. He was already loose, already breathing evenly, already settled into the space as if it belonged to him. His shoes were off. His feet rested flat against the floor, grounded, familiar with the texture beneath them. He did not look at Bruce when he entered. Not out of disrespect, out of certainty. This man was known for one thing, and one thing only. He had never lost a real fight. Not an exhibition, not a match with rules. A real fight. The kind that ended when someone could no longer continue, or chose not to. There were stories about him, but they were never told loudly. They moved in fragments, half-finished sentences, pauses where names should have been. Men would say, "He went up against," and then stop. Or, "that night in," and then change the subject. What made him dangerous was not his size. He was solid, yes, but not imposing. Not the kind of man who announced himself through bulk. What unsettled people was something harder to explain. He did not rush. He did not posture. He did not escalate. He simply waited, and eventually the other person broke themselves against that waiting. Bruce felt at the moment his foot crossed the threshold. Not fear, recognition. This was not a room where demonstration mattered. This was a room where identity was tested quietly. Someone closed the door behind him. The sound was soft, almost apologetic. No one spoke. The man at the center finally turned. Their eyes met, and something subtle shifted, not in the room, in the men watching, because they recognized the look that passed between them. It was not aggression. It was assessment. Not "can I defeat you?" but "what are you actually standing on?" Bruce did not bow. The other man did not nod. Neither offered courtesy, because courtesy would have implied equality, and neither was willing to concede that yet. Bruce placed his bag down slowly against the wall. He removed his jacket with deliberate calm, not because he was relaxed, but because he refused to rush his own presence. The silence stretched. Too long. One of the observers shifted his weight unconsciously, then stopped himself, aware of the sound his shoes might make. The man who had never lost a fight finally spoke. "You're lighter than I expected." His voice was low, not challenging, observational. Bruce answered without hesitation. "You're slower than you think." There was no insult in it, just information. A thin smile appeared on the other man's face, not because he was amused, but because he was intrigued. Intrigue was rare for him. Most men revealed themselves in the first 10 seconds. Bruce had not. They moved closer to the center without agreeing to do so. No one announced rules, because rules would have been artificial here. This was not about proving technique. This was about something less visible. Who collapses first when certainty fails? The man rolled his shoulders once, slowly, testing the air. Bruce remained still, too still. One of the witnesses noticed it then, the difference. The other man filled the space with presence. Bruce removed himself from it. He did not project dominance. He reduced signal. His breathing was quiet enough that it disappeared into the room. His eyes did not lock. They drifted, soft, peripheral, as if watching everything except the man in front of him. That unsettled the fighter more than any glare could have, because dominance expects resistance. And Bruce offered none. Time slowed, not metaphorically, physiologically. Heart rates shifted, attention narrowed. This was no longer two men preparing to move. This was two systems testing each other's assumptions. The man who had never lost took a small step forward. Bruce did not retreat. He did not advance. He adjusted his weight barely. The floor creaked softly beneath Bruce's foot. The sound was insignificant, but the fighter noticed it. And in that moment, doubt entered, not as fear, but as calculation. Bruce Lee was not behaving like someone who intended to win a fight. He was behaving like someone who intended to end a belief. The silence returned, heavier now, because everyone in the room understood something instinctively. Whatever happened next would not be retold accurately. The man who had never lost a real fight shifted his stance. It was a small adjustment, almost invisible to anyone without experience. A redistribution of weight, a subtle widening of his base, the kind of movement made by someone who had learned over years that balance decides outcomes before strength ever does. Bruce noticed it instantly. He noticed everything, but he did not respond in kind. That was the first fracture. Most fighters mirror. They answer movement with movement, tension with tension. It is how the nervous system seeks reassurance. Symmetry feels safe. Bruce offered asymmetry. He remained loose where structure was expected. His arms hung naturally, not in a guard that could be read, not in a posture that invited prediction. His center of gravity stayed mobile, undefined, as if he had not yet decided where the encounter would occur. This unsettled the rhythm. The other man inhaled slowly through his nose. He was not nervous. He was calibrating. This was how he always began, by letting the other man reveal himself through impatience, through aggression, through the need to prove something. But Bruce did not advance, and he did not withdraw. Seconds passed, longer than comfort allowed. The watchers felt it in their chests. That uncomfortable sensation when nothing happens, but something is already wrong. The man who had never lost took another step forward. Closer now, close enough that the air between them felt occupied. Bruce tilted his head slightly, not away, not toward, just enough to alter the angle of perception. The movement was almost casual, but it forced the fighter to recalibrate distance. And distance, to him, had always been absolute. He had built his identity on knowing exactly where danger began. Bruce blurred that line. The fighter's eyes narrowed, not in anger, in concentration. He extended one hand, not to strike but to test. A probing gesture, an invitation for reaction. Bruce did not flinch. He did not block. He did not counter. He shifted, a fraction of an inch, enough that the hand passed through space that had been occupied a moment before. The room exhaled, not audibly, internally, because everyone saw it, not the movement, the absence of resistance. The fighter withdrew his hand slowly. This was new. He had trained against speed, against strength, against unpredictability, but not against someone who refused to engage on expected terms. Bruce's breathing remained steady, unforced, almost imperceptible. The fighter realized something then, not consciously, but in the way his shoulders tightened. Bruce was not reacting to him. He was reacting to something else, to timing, to intent, to moments before they formed. That realization carried weight, because it meant control was no longer mutual. The fighter circled to his left. Bruce pivoted without moving his feet, a rotation through the hips, smooth and economical, keeping alignment without announcing it. Again, no mirroring. Again, no escalation. The fighter felt pressure building, not physical pressure, but cognitive. He was being watched in a way he could not feel, judged without expression, measured without confrontation. His confidence had always come from certainty. Certainty of outcome. Certainty of superiority. Certainty that the other man would eventually reveal weakness. Bruce revealed nothing. Minutes passed. They felt longer. Sweat formed on the fighter's back, not from exertion, but from sustained alertness. His body was preparing for impact that refused to arrive. Bruce, by contrast, looked untouched by time. Not relaxed, but unburdened by urgency. One of the observers noticed Bruce's eyes drift, not away from the fighter but beyond him, as if he were listening to something else, some internal rhythm. That observer would later struggle to explain why this was unsettling. Only that it was. The fighter broke the standoff. He lunged, not fully, a half-commitment, a test of reflex. Bruce moved, finally, but not backward. He stepped inside the space, inside the line of expectation. The fighter's arm extended into emptiness, while Bruce's shoulder brushed past it, light, almost apologetic. There was contact, but no strike, no throw, just proximity, just the quiet realization that Bruce had entered a place the fighter believed was inaccessible. They separated instinctively. The fighter's breath was louder now, not labored, but audible. Bruce's was still silent. The imbalance was no longer theoretical. It was physiological. The fighter felt it. That subtle shift when your body realizes it is no longer dictating the terms of engagement. He straightened slightly, asserting posture. Bruce softened, yielding visually, but not structurally. The men watching understood something then. This was not about winning. This was about erasure, about making a certain way of fighting irrelevant. The fighter had built his reputation on dominance through certainty. Bruce was dissolving certainty itself. Another exchange, another near contact, another moment where Bruce moved first, not faster, but earlier. He was acting before decisions became visible, before muscles committed, before intention hardened. The fighter began to hesitate. Just a fraction, but hesitation is loud to someone who listens for it. Bruce listened. He waited. He let the hesitation echo. The room felt smaller, the walls closer, time compressed. Then, finally, the fighter committed fully. Everything he had. A real attack, the kind that ended stories. Bruce did not meet it head-on. He did not oppose force with force. He stepped, turned, redirected. The motion was brief, precise, almost disappointing to watch. There was no explosion, no dramatic collision, just a sudden reorganization of bodies. And then silence. The fighter stood frozen for a heartbeat longer than made sense. His eyes widened, not in pain, in understanding. He had been inside control and not known it. When he tried to move, his balance betrayed him. Not violently, just enough. Enough to end the moment. Enough to end the belief. He stepped back, hands lowered, not in surrender. In recalibration, Bruce straightened, still calm, still quiet, still offering nothing to grasp. No one spoke, because no one knew how to frame what had just occurred. There was no winner to announce, no defeat to explain, only a shift, something irreversible. The man who had never lost a real fight had not been beaten, but he had been displaced, and displacement is harder to recover from than loss. Bruce picked up his jacket. The sound of fabric moving felt loud in the room. He did not look at the other man. He did not need to. The encounter was already over, but its consequence was not, because everyone there would carry this moment differently. Some would deny it. Some would mythologize it. Some would bury it. And one man would never again be as certain as he once was. Bruce walked toward the door. Before opening it, he paused. Not dramatically, just long enough to let the silence settle one final time. Then he left, and the room remained. Warm, still, forever altered. No one moved at first, not because they were instructed to stay still, but because motion felt inappropriate, as if the room itself needed time to understand what had just passed through it. The man who had never lost a real fight remained where he was, standing, balanced, yet altered. His posture had not collapsed, but something beneath it had shifted. The subtle alignment between confidence and certainty was no longer intact. His shoulders were squared, but his eyes were no longer anchored. He was replaying something, not the movements, not the positions, but the moments between them. Those were harder to locate, harder to name. A witness cleared his throat, then stopped halfway through the sound, unsure if even that small noise was allowed. Another man glanced at the door Bruce had closed behind him, half expecting it to open again, as if explanation might return with him. It did not. The fighter exhaled slowly. The breath was controlled, professional, but it carried weight. He had been trained to evaluate damage, physical structural, tactical. This was none of those. His body was intact. His balance had returned. His breath was steady. And yet something essential had been interrupted. For the first time in his career, he could not clearly articulate what had happened. That disturbed him more than pain ever had. Someone finally spoke. Not question. A statement. That was different. The word hung in the air, insufficient and unavoidable at the same time. The fighter nodded once. Not in agreement. In acknowledgement. He walked to the edge of the room and sat down, elbows resting lightly on his knees. This, too, was unusual. He typically remained standing after engagements, maintaining physical authority even in rest. Now he needed grounding. Across the room, a man who had watched countless fights, real ones, not exhibitions, realized his hands were trembling slightly. He clasped them together, embarrassed by the reaction. Nothing violent had occurred. Nothing dramatic. Yet his nervous system had responded as if it had witnessed something dangerous. Because it had, just not in the way danger is usually defined. The fighter ran a hand across his jaw. He was not bruised, but he felt exposed, as though a private assumption had been made public without consent. The assumption that mastery was visible. That dominance announced itself. That experience guaranteed control. Bruce had violated all three ideas without appearing to challenge them directly. That was the most unsettling part. There had been no humiliation, no conquest, no declaration, just quiet removal. Later, much later, someone would try to describe the encounter to a friend who had not been there. He would fail repeatedly. Each attempt would sound exaggerated or incomplete. He would eventually stop trying, because the moment resisted translation. It was not a story that fit into victory or defeat. It did not reward embellishment. It punished certainty. The fighter stood again, this time slowly, deliberately, as if testing whether the floor still supported the same rules. It did, but he did not trust it anymore. He gathered his things without ceremony. No one stopped him. No one congratulated him. No one challenged him. As he reached the door, he paused, not because he expected Bruce to be there, but because he understood, suddenly, that the encounter would not end when he left the room. It would follow him, into training, into fights, into moments of decision where instinct once ruled without interference. Now, instinct would hesitate. Just enough. Bruce never spoke of the encounter. Not publicly, not privately, not even obliquely. For him, it had already resolved itself. There was nothing to preserve, nothing to defend, nothing to prove. That, too, was part of what made it difficult to absorb. The witnesses would debate it quietly over the years. Some would insist Bruce had won. Others would argue there had been no contest at all. A few would claim it never happened. But none of them would return to their previous understanding of control unchanged. Because something had been revealed, briefly, imperfectly, and then withdrawn. A different way of standing in the world. A different relationship to force. One that did not seek acknowledgement. One that did not need validation. The man who had never lost a real fight continued fighting. He continued winning. But those closest to him noticed a change. A slight delay before engagement. A preference for certainty over dominance. A new respect for silence. He had learned something he could not unlearn. That there are encounters which do not end careers. They end illusions. And those endings are permanent. Years later, when someone asked him about Bruce Lee, he answered carefully. Not with praise. Not with dismissal. Just a pause. Then a sentence that sounded incomplete. He was operating somewhere else. He never clarified. He did not need to. Those who understood did not ask. And those who did not would never hear it the way it was meant. The truth lingered in that pause. Unclaimed, unrecorded, unresolved, exactly where it belonged.